What if our world leaders were held accountable for their actions? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Emmy winner Terry Jastrow. We're going to talk about his new book. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on Guys Radio and on KCAA Radio here in Southern California. Guys TV, Guys Radio. Thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio here at KCAA in Southern California, my worldwide podcast and YouTube channel. And right now we've got our very special guest for this week, a storied published author, successful screenwriter, producer, playwright, 7-time Emmy winner for TV production, nominated 17 times. His name is Terry Jastrow. He's written a book, a very provocative book called The Trial of George W. Bush. We're going to get into that in a moment. Terry's currently writing his next novel, and his screenplay, Good Luck, Mr. Anthony, and stage play, Jane Fonda's War, are currently being considered for production in New York and LA. Terry and his wife, actress Ann Archer, live in Southern California. He's done it all. He studied acting with Lee Strasberg, Milton Katselas, also taught acting, appeared in numerous feature films, TV series, theater, directed LA stage premiere of a couple of Bike Chicks Sitting Around Talking, starring his wife Ann Archer and Elizabeth Ashley. Directed, it just goes on and on and on and on. But for today's discussion, we're going to focus on two areas of Terry's storied career. One is this book, this provocative book, and makes you really think. It's called The Trial of George W. Bush. And also we're going to talk about Terry's background in sports production. He's worked on everything, Olympics, PGA, Super Bowls, you name it. So I've got a superstar with us today here on Guys Radio, and I'm thrilled. So let's get started right now. Imagine a world where humanity has turned its collective attention to what can make the human condition better by holding political leaders responsible for their potentially corrupt actions. How would they play out? So my special guest, Terry Jastrow on Guys Radio. The name of the book is The Trial of George W. Bush. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Hi, Robert.
So this is a very thought-provoking novel. It contemplates the crossroads of war and peace, highlighting the repercussions of impunity versus consequence when a world leader's quote unquote illegal actions are held to account. So what happens here is in an imaginary world following 9/11 and following the Iraqi invasion, the International Court of Law takes George W. Bush and puts him on trial, basically. So let me start with this, Terry. The invasion of Iraq and the toppling of Saddam Hussein took place 20 years ago. And as important as that war was, what inspired you to write about it now? And what are the kind of archetypes and truths that are in this story that are still applicable today?
Well, it's simple. If we allow heads of states, specifically in this case, the President of the United States, to wage a war that is deemed to be illegal, then we doom society with more and more such wars. Eventually, the waging of wars that are determined to be illegal has to be paid for when it's done. And the Iraq War, upon study, should never have been fought. This came as people who were paying attention at those days, and most of us were. 9/11, September 11, happened in 2001. George W. Bush was president of the United States. His single most important job was to bring Osama bin Laden to justice, who was in Afghanistan. After a year and a half of being unable to bring Osama bin Laden to justice, he turned his attention and the attention of the United States to Saddam Hussein in Iraq, who had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks. If anything, Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden were each the enemy of each other. But Bush, because he's a very charismatic guy and a convincing guy, convinced the United States to approve his war with Iraq. So he then says that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Now it's also, when I say Bush, I'm also talking about Cheney and Rumsfeld as well, his co-conspirators. But in international criminal law, the single person most responsible is held to justice first. So that's why it's the trial of George W. Bush first. So after spending more than a year trying to find weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, we couldn't do it. They then arrest Saddam Hussein and put him to death. And we stay in that war for 8 years and 5 months. 8 years and 5 months. So, thousands of Americans were killed. Tens of thousands of Americans were wounded, many still suffering from those wounds today. And we killed 1 million Iraqis in that war. Now, if it was not useful, and if it was waged illegally, do we allow those people who did it to walk free? That becomes the essential beginning question.
Okay, so why did you choose to make this a novel? I know the power of story is huge. Was that your driving inspiration for this? Make it a story instead of just laying out, like you just laid out what you feel are the facts for this. Others on the other side might add a bunch of their own details on this, but I'm not going to debate you. As I mentioned earlier in my show, I don't take sides. I don't do politics on the show, but I found that this is a very timely book because it's about the implications of holding our leaders accountable, not just America, but all around the world, to make sure that they do the right thing for people. Because what seems to be happening nowadays, Terry, is that there's so much use of executive orders now. That war what's interesting is that was actually approved by Congress. And in today's day and age, and since then, there's been, I think what happened was when Obama kind of got stymied on doing a lot of stuff, he started taking out the pen and doing executive orders, and then Trump trumped him on that, more executive orders. And now you got Biden doing mandates and things like that, executive orders. And now it seems like it's gone down to the state and the city level where our leaders are now, I'm in power, and that's it. It's not this, our three branches of government have seemed to be, in my opinion, just as a citizen, diluted. Like, what happened? Decisions are just being made arbitrarily based on the beliefs of one individual. That's a big thing to unpack.
Yeah, well, to answer the basic question is, I wrote it as a novel set in the future because, first of all, it has a legal basis, which is in international criminal law, there is no statute of limitations, meaning if a suspected criminal, he is liable for his crimes until the day he dies. So Bush is about 75 years old. So even to this day, as someone would read that novel, which when I wrote it is set in the future, because it hasn't happened, obviously, he is subject to arrest and trial until the day he dies. So in that sense, it's contemporary for another 10 or 15 years. I don't know how many more years George is going to live. I wish him only the best. But he is subject to be arrested and put on trial for this until the day he dies under international criminal law. So I was very careful from the beginning to study international criminal law as distinct from our United States law. And I wanted to tell the story from the beginning in a way that was balanced and honest. I wanted to set out the story, the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, from Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice, etc., and let the reader, let the audience decide for themselves. So then at the end of the book, you would think either he is found guilty or innocent, and that's the very thing I didn't want to do. But something else very unusual happens, which ends the novel.
Yeah, I think the reader gets the ending that they want, not in the way they expect. Let's talk about George Bush a little bit, because it's interesting that you guys go way back. You were friends. You played baseball against each other. You know each other. And I'm wondering how, you take him on like this and with your statements like he could be arrested at any time. I mean, how's the relationship going these days, Terry?
Well, I haven't seen him in a long time. I will tell you, George W. Bush he's the most popular guy in any room. He's got a great personality. He's a great sense of humor. His daddy, George H.W. Bush, was an oil man in Midland, Texas. At the same time my daddy was. George is, I think, a year or two older than I am. But we played him in Little League Baseball. I was on the Braves. He was on the Cubs. I'm too modest to say who won, but the Cubs lost. Okay, and he was the catcher. And you'd go up there to the bat, and and Bush would give you all kinds of, John. He'd jaw with you the whole time. He was very playful. And then I went to the University of Houston at a time when George was a young oil man in Houston, and by just coincidence, we dated sisters. I was dating a girl but both before all of this before we both found the love of our lives. But I was dating a girl by the name of Nancy, and her sister's name was Beth, and George was dating her. And the last time I saw George was at the governor's office in Austin, in Texas. And Ann and I went in, and he invited us in, and we went in and we spent, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes talking. And he put his boots up on the table and put his hands behind his head. And he said, he just announced he was going to run for president. And he said, if Colin Powell would run for president, I wouldn't have to do it, but he's not going to do it. So I put my hat in the thing and run for president. And sure enough, he won. So, but he's a lot of fun in a social connection. That's for sure.
Have you heard from him and any of his inner circle or any quote unquote government resources since the book came out? Because it used to have a different name. You changed it, right? It was Prisoner 043 or something.
Yeah, I self-published it in the beginning. First-time writers is terrific. I've done a lot of things in a lot of areas, but publishing a novel is, I don't have to tell you, it's hugely competitive and thus difficult. Right. So I self-published it. It was originally called The Trial of Prisoner 043. George was our 43rd president, and happily it caught the attention of a publisher in New York. And they contacted me and said, listen, I think it's a really important book. It needs to be out there. The conversation needs to happen because, wars should always be very carefully adjudicated by the public. And they said, we would like for some revisions and maybe even change the title. And I said, count me in. And so Square One Publishers in New York, they're a great bunch of guys, smart, experienced. And so thus the new book. But I've done it. That's a final time I can do it. I can't write it any better than that. That's for all time. And I hope a lot of people read it because, I care about peace on earth as opposed to war. And, we don't have to just stand by and let our elected officials do what they want. They have to be held accountable if the majority of people think that they've done the wrong thing.
Now, when you look at the global stage and the international court system, there's a lot of authoritarian leaders that could be taken to task. You picked George Bush. I guess under part of the guise that America has to be held to a higher standard, and we don't want this stuff happening at home. So you use this example. But if you look around, Putin annexing Crimea and a lot of the stuff's been done with China, building those islands and everything. And there's just been a lot of kind of questionable activities done by a lot of major countries around the world. So one is, what do you think about that? And secondly, why is it that some of these superpowers are not involved with the international criminal court?
Let me take the second part of the question first. The International Criminal Court, the ICC, was created by the United Nations, which was created after World War II. When people of goodwill finally put an end to Adolf Hitler, and it created the United Nations, built in the United States, for all countries because the world was getting smaller. So there was so much activity that was internationally based not just nationally based. So the people, smart people of goodwill, understood that henceforth there needed to be international, the International Criminal Court to take on those who may have committed international crimes, such as the United States invading Iraq. And so it had its, Eleanor Roosevelt and a number of really smart and able people supported it. So the International Criminal Court was built in The Hague in the Netherlands. And so it's for crimes that of international status. So I think it was brilliantly conceived, much needed, and I'm very happy we have it. Why isn't the United States a member of the International Criminal Court? Because there are some people that knew that there's every chance that some activity in the United States may be breaking international laws, and they didn't want to be held accountable for it, which is hardly a good reason. That's right. I will tell you that Bill Clinton, at the end of his term, started the process for the United States to join. And one of the first things George W. Bush did when he got in office is to eliminate, the hope of it. I hope the United States does become a member of the International Criminal Court, because I hope it's here to stay. And if the United States joins it, some of the others may as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Guys Radio, my very special guest is the multi-talented Terry Jastrow. We're talking about his novel, The Trial of George W. Bush. It's a very interesting, timely story, and it also has a lot of lessons that we need to take away from this. So you have some very compelling characters here, and I think you did a fantastic job writing the book. It's fast-paced, it's easy to digest, and I say that in a good way. You don't get bogged down, but you get into the legal details in a nice way, and it keeps moving. You've got Condoleezza Rice, Richard Clarke, Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, Donald Rumsfeld mentioned, or taking the stand, one or the other. How did you do your research on them and make your story and your storytelling as true as possible to who these people were and how they actually feel and acted based on the situation?
Thank you for that question. I will tell you that I love research. I find it very interesting because there's a certain amount that one knows, but there's a mountain of things that one doesn't know. I knew that this story particularly had to be rooted in the truth. If there were a lot of false things and lies said, it was never going to be taken seriously. So I became a student of international criminal law and international criminal law in comparison and contrast to U.S. law. And then hired a lot of international criminal law experts, attorneys, etc., to school me in it, and even professors of international law. And then I would have them actually read sections of the book and correct what was wrong. And it was really good because I had Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals. I got everybody on the scale because I want my audience to be not just Democrats or not just Republicans or whatever, but I wanted everybody to read it. And they had to believe that it was authentic, meaning both sides had to be advocated for equally and forcefully. So I just kept writing and writing and writing until I achieved that, because I knew I could never publish it unless that had been done. Does that answer your question?
It does very well, because you did a great job. I truly believed when Condoleezza Rice was on the stand, the character, quote unquote, I felt like I was listening to her, having seen her on TV so many times and getting familiar with her cadence and how her tone and everything. I think you did a fantastic job taking all of this on. But have you heard from any of their people saying, hey, you got me wrong, or hey, what are you doing? Or, hey, the prosecutor, remember what happened to him?
Yeah, no, I will tell you, speaking of Condoleezza Rice, I was also, part of the answer to the last question is I was also really benefited because a lot of the major characters have written their own books.
Mm-hmm, true.
So a lot of what I got about Condoleezza Rice came out of her book. And George had written a book, so it was easy. It was easy to. And then I knew some people who were associated with them, and I was just able to get kind of collateral interest in them. And again, I knew George since we were pre-teens. So it was just a lot of source material. This. After all, it was a major war fought, so there was a lot to be found, and I'm glad I got most of it.
It was interesting as I read through the book, and you had both sides, the prosecution and defense, and they had their strategies. But the war crime thing, when it's being prosecuted, you're nodding your head as you're reading, and then when you hear the defense, you're nodding your head and saying, "I kind of get that too." When throughout the process, from beginning to end of writing this book, did you have your point of view change at all by going through the process of writing the entire story and taking it on from both sides?
The answer is yes, because I couldn't think of a way to advocate for the prosecution, the ICC attorneys, or the defense, Bush's attorneys, unless I was an advocate of their position. So literally, when I was writing, the interrogation made by the prosecution, I was in their camp, and same for the defense, because I from the very beginning, Robert, I just felt that if this was a one-way story, it was not anything I wanted to have. I didn't set out to excoriate Bush and find him guilty. I set it out for people to be aware of what happens with international criminal law, making people aware of the fact that there is international criminal law, to do something in the future, to do whatever I could now to stop these wars, to advocate for peace over war. That's what propelled me to do it, even to this day.
So I think for our listeners out there, you hear the title of the book and it sounds like, oh, immediately, Bush is guilty, but that's not the case. The way Terry approached the book is that what if our leaders were held accountable for some of the actions they make? And we know our leaders do the best they can. And sometimes there's two perspectives. You watch the presidential debates, you hear two sides of the story, and there's always two sides to a story, but things can happen and people can get hurt and people can die. So good job in putting the book together. Terry, what do you want people to take away who've read this book and who are going to buy it?
First of all, is that elected officials should be responsible and held accountable for what they do. They're not absolved from law because of the president of the United States or vice president of the United States or secretary of state. No, they're held up to very specifically defined laws. And if those laws are broken and crimes are committed, they need to be held accountable for it, even if it's the biggest leaders of the biggest countries in the world, or especially leaders of the biggest countries in the world, because that's where the most damage can be made. So I wanted to, but I didn't want. I knew that I couldn't be preachy about it or professorial about it because nobody would pay attention. Plus, I have no credentials necessarily to teach about international criminal law, but I'm a storyteller and a fairly good storyteller. So I just used my passion for and interest in and ability to write such things to set it out there in the universe in hopes that a lot of people read it, and it adds to and changes the narrative.
And that's what we do here on Guys Radio. We bring in new information from thought leaders. People are taking a stand, putting information out there. And then our listeners determine, hey, I get it. I buy into it. Or maybe not, but at least I heard maybe it's a different point of view. Maybe it's reiterating their point of view. So thank you for that, Terry. But let's get on, if you don't mind. I want to talk about your career in sports, because Terry has one of the most storied careers in the world of sports from a production standpoint. He's worked on ABC Wide World of Sports, 6 Olympic Games, including opening and closing ceremonies, Winter Olympics, Summer Olympics, so many of Howard Cosell's broadcasts, PGA Golf, Super Bowl 19, which I believe was the 49ers in Stanford against the Dolphins, and just so much more. And also he did produce haute couture fashion shows in France. So just an amazing career you have. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get started in television, and what was the big break that led you to become the youngest sports producer ever at ABC?
Okay, so I was a pretty good golfer. I was medalist in the national junior and got beat in the quarterfinal round by Lanny Watkins, who went on to make championships. And we played each other in the USGA junior in the quarterfinal round. And Lanny got me. I think he beat me 2-1. And then later that summer, I think it was 1966, I was playing in the Texas Junior, and I won all my matches. And I get to the final match, and I'm playing with John Mahaffey, also a winner of a major championships, and I won. I won the Texas State Junior, beating Mahaffey. So I was a ranked junior player, and at the time, the University of Houston was by far the dominant golf team. They were to golf what UCLA was to basketball under Wooden. And the University of Houston's coach was Dave Thomas, and he tracks all but I was offered scholarships at UCLA and Oklahoma and Texas. But the University of Houston was the number one golf team. So I got a scholarship. I went and I played on the team. So here's the beginning of the answer to your question. So Byron Nelson, the legendary commentator Byron Nelson, was the co-host of ABC's Golf along with Chris Schenkel. Okay. So Byron Nelson has a nephew by the name of Kenny Newell, who is on the University of Houston golf team as well. So one day in the spring, Kenny Newell came down the golf teams, where we live, and said, "Hey, the ABC Sports is looking for spotters and scorers at the Houston Open this week. Anybody want to do it?" And everybody said no. And I said, "Whoa, ABC Sports, spanning the globe to bring a constant variety of sport, the thrill of victory." I said, "I'll do it." And so I came out and I worked for Keith Jackson.
Yeah, sure.
All right. I was on the 16th hole at Champions in Houston, and I worked for Keith Jackson. And after the day of rehearsal, I said, "Mr. Jackson, the thing about television commentators is, with all due respect, you guys only tell us about things we can see. I mean, guys that know golf, we watch things, and that's all you guys basically tell us." And he said, "Yeah, because we're out here all day long with rehearsals and production meetings, and we can't go out." And I said, "Well, I know a little something about it." And he said, "Well, the commercials, why don't you run down the tower?" And I'd go down and I'd ask players or caddies. So I'd come up and Keith Jackson would be saying things that announcers had never said. He would say, like, "Nicklaus made 3 birdies in a row on the front side," which no one had ever said in live television. This was 1967 or 68 or 69. And I remember I heard that Watson had made a 60-foot putt for an eagle at the 9th hole, which was before we were on the air. So Keith Jackson is saying, "Yeah, well, Watson made an eagle on the 9th hole. He made a 60-foot birdie." And so in the production meeting, they said, "Keith, how the hell do you know?" I said, "I got this kid who's a hustler." He goes up and down the tower. I mean, I literally go up and down, if I could go up there to him. And Bud Palmer was the announcer, who did not play golf and didn't know anything about golf. And he said, the producer, Chuck Howard, he said, "Oh my God, this kid, can I have this guy?" And Keith said, yeah, you can have him. And that's where I got started. So when I graduated from the University of Houston in June of 1970, I went back to Midland and did my laundry with my mom and dad and everything, and flew to New York like 2 weeks after I graduated from high school and started as a production assistant. So I started early as a PA, and that's why I became a producer, because Roone Arledge, the legendary producer of ABC Sports, did play golf. None of the other production guys did. He was a member of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club and Wingfoot. So he would take me out to play golf at Wingfoot. And we'd have a great time. We became friends, and he made me a producer of Wide World of Sports and all the Olympic Games starting when I was 22.
Amazing story. Great stuff. So you've done the Super Bowl, Indy, PGA, Summer, Winter Olympics. Which sports or events are the most challenging to work on? I see he's got right now for our listeners, seven Emmys that Terry's earned, and he was nominated 17 times. So incredible. He's like the GOAT of sports production here, along with, of course, Roone Arledge and some other folks. But great job. So which sporting events stood out to you as the most challenging and also the most satisfying to work on?
Well, I think the Super Bowl was great. I mean, it was great, and Roone, God love him, man, always had the Olympic Games. ABC Sports had the Winter and Summer Olympic Games, and that is the pinnacle of athleticism in the world. You know, countries from all around the world send their best in the Olympics, and you know, with Jim McKay and Chris Schenkel and these guys were great announcers and great guys. I think one of the great characteristics of an announcer is that they're your friend. You want to hang out with them. They're not just telling you a bunch of junk or their stats. You're hanging with them at a bar, and they're telling you stuff, and they know a bunch of stuff, and they want to share it with you. And Jim McKay is the guy that wrote, you know, spanning the globe to bring a constant variety of sports, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. This is ABC's Wide World of Sports. So it was about storytelling. And I just love that. I was drawn to that. And because of what I just told you, I probably still am the youngest network television producer ever, just because of these reasons. And then, of course, you know, we go through the season, and there's college football, there's the golf season, there's intermittent Wide World of Sports events, and every 2 or 4 years there's the Olympic Games. So it was a great life, and I did it for, I think, 22 years, and then it's another story how I started acting and directing and meeting Ann Archer, but eventually I had to leave away for others.
So when you were taking on a big project, let's say PGA Tour, from your perspective as a head of production, what do you do? How do you strategize? Okay, we're going to follow this player or that player, and you know, what are the strategies on golf versus maybe the Super Bowl? How do you kind of differentiate?
Okay, that is a more incisive, educated question that even you may know it was, and I'll tell you why. Almost all sports are played in a confined field, right. A baseball diamond, a football field, a track, tennis, basketball. Almost all sports you can think of are played in a confined playing field and under specific times, snaps, serves, and all that. Golf, the sport of golf, starts at sunup. It's being played across the countryside, and it doesn't end till sundown, right? So the producer can't, and the director can't just sit back and watch the thing happen. You have to go find the game, and that's something that I was educated to do, and you have to have an instinct in it. Because when you do a sport like that, if you do something in present time, often you're late. You have to have an instinct about it, a sense that Nicklaus is going to play that shot and he may knock it in, or Watson's going to chip it in from the bunker. You get a sense of the player and the occasion, and then you have to get there before it happens. So, I just was blessed. I had a great opportunity because of Roone Arledge, but then I had a sense to be fairly quick in my mind, fairly smart, and I was able to imagine things would happen before they did and get it right more often than wrong.
What do you do, Terry, when you're like you did the Super Bowl? Super Bowl, I think it was
19, I think.
19, yeah, 19. And that was 49ers blew out the Dolphins, and the storyline was kind of Montana, the old gunslinger against the new kid, Marino, and the Dolphins got blown out. When you're from a production standpoint, what do you do when you see the games of getting into a blowout and you've got to maintain the viewership, and the Super Bowl is a special football game because it transcends the usual fans? What do you do as a producer when it's going on? You say, oh no, this is a blowout. I've got to do something to keep our audience hooked. So how do you convey that to the announcers? How does your team revise and tweak the storytelling?
Okay, good question, Robert, and I'm very happy to answer it. Let me just say one thing for clarification, for authenticity here. An event like the Super Bowl has a number of producers and a number of directors. Okay, so there's a lot going on. The producer was Bob Goodrich, good guy from Dallas, Texas, who used to be, I gave him his first job. And he did a lot of things for me, and he jumped up the thing. Finally, he's the producer of Monday Night Football and ABC's professional football. And the season director, his name is Craig Janoff, because basically I did college football. But for the Super Bowl, Bob Goodrich and Craig Janoff asked me to come and be the co-director of it. I think it takes a lot of study. And because you have to know tendencies, and then it's just a question of this instinct, because often if you have to wait and see something that happens in the camera and say take two, and the TD punches the tip up on the camera, you've missed it. So you have to kind of sense things are happening, be knowledgeable enough to know where to go, and experienced enough to know what can happen, and then you got to get lucky.
Similar situation, but very different. The Olympics. You've got all these events happening over a course of a couple of weeks. As a producer, behind the scenes, how do you determine, okay, Chinese badminton versus Yugoslav, Bulgarian hockey game. You've got so much going on, and a lot of times the events aren't being broadcast in real time; they're taped or whatever. But it doesn't matter. I think it's an art to be able to juggle all that stuff. I have to think that would be very tough to really put together a great storytelling when you're dealing with something with so many moving parts as the Olympics.
Yes. Okay. First of all, to be clear about this, Roone Arledge was the executive president of ABC Sports and executive producer. And so, especially for the Olympics, I mean, he would be at the Super Bowls, he would be at the big college football games, the U.S. Open golf. Roone would come out. But when it came to the Olympics, he was the guy. He was the executive producer. He sat in the control room with, 40 or 50 monitors up there in front of him of all coverage from all the Olympic venues, with people feeding him information. And this is his genius, his intelligence. So there's only a few people can do it. Guys like me were out directing track and field or boxing, or we'll get to Cosell in a while, right? But, it's just a guy who's really knowledgeable, and has a sense about what the audience wants to see, because that's where the game is. Roone's a showman. These guys who are really good, they're Cecil B. DeMille of their time. They know what the people want. They know emotionally, they know statistically where the audience is, because they need to get the ratings up. Sponsors pay more. That's the game. And he was the king at it. I know there were good guys at NBC and CBS and Fox, all due respect. But for me, I mean, I'm an ABC Sports guy, which doesn't even exist anymore, right? Because it's now ESPN. Roone was a genius, but he was smart, and he had a lot of information to him. Sorry to be redundant. No. Excellent answer. Play-by-play announcers.
You worked with the cream of the crop and the top ones and all kinds of superstars, including, I think you mentioned in our talks that you know Al Michaels. You worked with Howard Cosell a lot. So tell us about a little bit about working with these announcers, and how do you have to do a little bit of wrangling when you're working with them, but you have to be respectful because they're superstars in their own, in their own game, if you will.
Yes. Yeah. Let's talk about Al Michaels for a moment, okay? And then I'll answer the question. Al Michaels is amazing. He is a one-off for sure. First of all, he's very playful. He loved to play tennis, and he's not the most physically fit guy you've ever seen. I mean, he's fine, but he was a really good tennis player and smart. And I play tennis too, but I like play a lot of other things. And he would pound on me to play tennis. We started playing a lot of tennis, and I finally said, "Alan, you're killing me with this tennis." And we started him to play golf, and he started to play golf, and it was a lot of fun. But I think there's a common bond between the announcer and the producer, because they really are a team together. And at some point, you have to allow them the room to interject their own view of it, their own poetry to it. Because if it's all stats, facts, it becomes too dry, and there's not the poetry or the narration that belongs. And I'm sorry to say, and I won't mention, but there's a lot of announcers who are like really good, sort of at the nuts and bolts. They give you the facts, but there's no poetry to it. It's those guys that can give you the facts and the details for sure. They are great storytellers as well. Did I answer that question?
Yes, you did. It's interesting. I was just thinking when you were saying that, because in Monday Night Football, you had three guys I have a beef with my friends. So let me tell you a quick story. So Monday Night Football, you had Don Meredith, and you had Howard Cosell, and you had Frank Gifford. And it was nice because they were having fun, and it wasn't. Yeah. Now I watch Monday Night Football, and they still have the three guys in the booth, and it's like, please, some silence. If one guy is second, he finishes talking, the other guy's on top of it, the next guy's on top of it, and goes back. It's like a fight for airtime. I just turned the sound down. I tried the Manning thing, and okay, I applaud them for doing something new, but I need a little air when I'm watching TV, and maybe that's a sign of my age, but it's I don't want to be assaulted here. Just let me enjoy the game a little bit.
Yeah, thoughts? I totally agree with you, Robert. You have to let every story, you have to let it breathe. And I think a lot of these guys, and even the NFL playoffs now, I'm sitting in there and I'm like, I wish these guys would just shut up, because you got the play-by-play guy and the expert commentator, and they're just carrying on a bunch of bullshit conversation that is parenthetical off to it. They don't understand the importance of silence, because why? Among other things, it engages the audience. I'm sorry. I was blessed with learning from great announcers, so I didn't have to do that. I learned what I knew at the foot of Roon, but also working with great announcers. But I'm with you. It drives me crazy, and you and I should plead right now that these guys shut up a little bit and let the game speak for itself. Okay, Robert.
All right. We got time for one quick Howard Cosell story, and then we got to wrap it.
Don't give them my email address, though, those guys. Oh, my God. One story. Oh, no. Oh, wow. Oh, there's so
just an insight, anything. Yeah.
Muhammad Ali stories and Kurt Flood. Oh, my God. I don't even know. I'll give you, I will tell you a story that hardly anybody knows. Howard, during his career, there was a radio station in Kansas City that had a campaign for the most hated person in America, if I'm getting my facts right. And the person who was voted the most hated person in America was Howard Cosell. It's a bit of a you can imagine there's plenty of people that love being privileged. So we were doing a boxing event for Wide World of Sports in London the next week. Howard and his wife Emmy and I were there, and we were sitting there one day, and there was a play on called The Mousetrap, which was the longest running theatrical play in the world ever. It was like, I don't know, years in some theater in London, and we didn't have anything to do. And Emmy, Howard's wife, said, "Let's go see The Mousetrap." So we got tickets and we went there, and we sat down with these really good sticks in the center. And before just before the curtain went up and lights went, the guy turned around. The guy from the row sitting in front of us turned around and said, "Howard Cosell, wow, it's fun you're here. I'm from Kansas City, and a radio station just voted the most hated guy in America, and you won. You won." Thinking Howard would like that. He was so devastated. He did. And the minute the first act was over, because I know he wanted to go, and his wife Emmy said we'd have to walk out of the middle of the aisle and walk. So, but the second the first thing was over, the first act was over, we got up and walked up, and he had about 6 vodkas in a row because he felt like everybody thought everybody loved him. But so that's
amazing. Amazing. Well, great stories. You got an amazing career, and I love the fact that you did the training because I think storytelling is everything. Like, you trained as an actor, you trained as a writer, you acted, you taught acting, you trained with, and you learned from Lee Strasberg, and then you integrated that into all of your work across sports, across creating novels, plays, scripts for TV, movies, features. Just really well done. And it's just an absolute honor and pleasure talking with you. And the book, once again, it's called The Trial. Absolutely.
My publisher would kill me if I didn't do this. Can you see it?
We got it. The Trial of George W. Bush. Terry Jastrow, winner of 7 Emmy Awards on Guys Radio. Terry, you're welcome back for any of your other projects. We'll do it again. I had a blast. Thank you so much.
Okay. Peace, brother.
All right. If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please support us by subscribing to our channels. Thanks.